Hi, everybody. It's Ian here from IBI Performance Coaching. Today, we're going to be talking about the difference between training for strength and training for hypertrophy. Enjoy. So, we're talking about the difference between training for strength and training for hypertrophy. Obviously, there's a lot of overlap here. A bigger muscle is, in almost all cases, a stronger muscle, but a stronger muscle is not always a bigger muscle. And so it is kind of important to understand how these are different. Now, especially if you're just getting started with exercise, there's that overlap is going to be so nearly complete that you're probably not really going to be able to distinguish between them all that well. But as you advance, as you spend more time training, this becomes more important. And so, what I want to offer today, I'm not going to give you a whole lot of numbers. I'm not going to give you a whole lot of studies. I'm not going to give all that kind of stuff. What I am going to give you is a very simple model in the form of a metaphor that will help you to understand the distinction between them and navigate your own training journey. Okay, and that distinction boils down to this: strength is something you have to teach your body, hypertrophy is something you have to traumatize your body into producing. So let's dig into it. Talk about strength first. Strength is basically taught or learned or practiced, any of those things, and any of those, they're all interrelated, obviously. But if you were to think about what makes effective teaching, it's really the same things that make effective strength training. And so this is stuff like spaced repetition. So if you're trying to learn something, and we'll take a really simple example here, like you're trying to study a foreign language, you're trying to learn some vocabulary for it, okay? The least effective or very ineffective comparatively way to learn that material would be to just study it 10 times, 20 times in a row with no break. It's much more effective to approach it with spaced repetition. And so this would be expose yourself to the material you're trying to learn, take a break from it, expose yourself to that material again. And this is why, your flashcard apps will have you come back every day to do this sort of thing. They'll also repeat the stuff that you have studied, but they'll give you space between it. So a very ineffective flashcard app would be one that showed you the same vocabulary word 25 times in a row, because obviously you should know it the second time, but you don't really know it. You're just repeating what you heard the first time. And effective learning actually consists of putting the information in and then having enough time that your brain starts to prune away that information or get rid of it in a desire for not wasting, your memory. Your brain is always trying to get rid of stuff that you don't need. It's essentially always trying to clean house a little bit. And you want to interrupt that cleaning house process and tell your brain, no, 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 we actually need that information. And you'll have to do this multiple times for the harder to learn things before your brain finally says, all right, I get the message. I'll hold on to this thing long term. And that's where it becomes more or less permanent. And so really learning is an act of repeatedly beginning to forget and then recalling the information. And so when we're applying this to strength training, you want to practice the lift or do the movement or practice the strength feat, take a break from it, and then practice it again. It's not a good idea to just cram it all into one set. And this is why power lifters are going to take 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes between their sets. It's why they're going to do the lifts, the feats that they're working on multiple times in a week. It's like studying flashcards. And that brings us actually to frequency, which is the next one that is very important for teaching something. Doing it once a week is not a great way to learn something. you want to be hitting it multiple times a week, if not like every day, right? And so, because again, it reminds the brain, reminds the body. It helps you practice the skill. It makes it more permanent. And this is not going to be true when we get to hypertrophy. There's going to be a pretty big distinction here, but this thing, spaced repetition and frequency, are very important. Okay. A third one is going to be something called interleaving. When you're learning something, you don't want to just study it in one way. And so, if you always use the same flashcard app to study your vocabulary, you can actually get to a point where you only recognize the word when it's written in the exact font that the flashcard uses, for example, right? If you really only stick to that thing, you want to have different kinds of related practice that give you different angles essentially on the same information. And so, if we were to apply this to strength training, to take about something like the West Side barbell method, if they're training a back squat, they're going to train the back squat. They need to practice that movement. But in order to give the body a little bit of a break, in order to create the spaced repetition, in order to give the joints a little bit of a rest, or in order to train different aspects of that movement, they might put stuff in like variable resistance, training with chains or paused squats or bottom up squats, or maybe even something like front squats or Zercher squats or something like this, that are essentially, again, this word is interleaving. They're putting in different aspects, different angles on that same information to help reinforce it from many different directions, and essentially creating a network of interrelated, interconnected points of knowledge or understanding. And really, that's how we make our knowledge. Not I want to say calcify, but we solidify maybe our knowledge is by creating those networks. Okay, the last really big one here is that it should be a manageable challenge. So this is why when you're training for strength, you want to go with 70 to 90% of your max, that sort of thing, stay in that sort of range. And you're not trying to reach failure. You're trying to stack successes. Educating, teaching can be essentialized as raising the expectations of the person you're trying to teach, getting them to expect more from themselves, helping them shift their identity to the point where they expect themselves to be able to understand the concept, to learn the concept, to know the concept, to be able to execute on the concept. And strength training is very similar. You basically want to raise your body's expectation for strength performance. Your nervous system, your brain, your muscles, all those things. You want to teach it that you are very good at these things, and that's how it becomes very good at these things. And you do that by stacking success after success. So manageable challenges. We're looking at what's called a zone of proximal development here, which is if you have a core center of a circle that's what's already mastered. Okay, then just outside that will be the zone of proximal development. The things that aren't yet mastered, they still represent a challenge and an opportunity for growth. And then outside of that ring, there might be the overwhelming zone where it's too challenging, it's too much. And so, you don't train for strength by loading up 3 times your max, 1 rep max on a back squat and trying to lift that. You're gonna end up hurting yourself. You'll get overwhelmed. It'll cause breakdown. Okay, so what we want is manageable challenge. All right, so that's teaching your body strength. You're trying to teach your body strength. On the other side, the hypertrophy side, we are looking to essentially traumatize your body, or specifically your muscles. Why do I use the word traumatize? Well, I mean, you could say torture the muscles, but really I think trauma is the best word here because there is a phenomenon known as post-traumatic growth. And this is where something happens that challenges your assumptions, your beliefs, your expectations, your identity to such a degree that it sort of shakes those things, maybe even shatters them, tears them down, and forces you to sort of rebuild them. Now, is it, it's possible that you don't get that sort of growth. This is post-traumatic stress disorder, where it goes in a pathological direction. And in that case, you're not rebuilding those things. You are allowing them to continue in a state of dysfunction. But if you do take the path of rebuilding those things, what you end up with is a more resilient, wiser set of assumptions, beliefs, identity, claims, that kind of thing. So post traumatic growth. And really, any traumatic experience, whether it is psychological or physical, is a function of experiencing insufficiency, coming face to face with insufficiency. You have an encounter with something and you realize that your current capacity or current level of consciousness, there is a gap between external events and your capacity to deal with external events. And that gap is so extensive that it causes a breakdown, as that I talked about before, a breakdown of assumptions or breakdown of beliefs or breakdown of identity or something like that. That is the source of psychological trauma in a nutshell. So when you take it into the physical realm, you traumatize the muscles by exposing them to their own inefficiency. You ask them to perform a feat that they are not capable of performing. And this is where training close to, up to, and past failure is really the secret sauce of hypertrophy. Because in doing that, you are exposing them to failure. So when you teach, you want to stack successes and build self belief and raise expectations. When you traumatize for the purpose of growth, you want to sort of expose to failure in a hope of breaking things down a bit and forcing adaptation in response. Okay, so that's really the fundamental difference between them. Now, in order to get the post-traumatic growth after the traumatic experience, there needs to be sufficient support there. And in the physical realm, that would mean getting enough sleep, eating enough food, taking enough time off. And so frequency, as I said earlier, is a big distinction. If you're trying to build muscle, frequency is much less important than it is if you're trying to build strength, right? And so like incidental workouts are something that I'm constantly harping on about. What you're doing if you're doing incidental workouts is you are teaching your body to be strong. And that is why isometrics, overcoming isometrics, pushing on something immovable, pulling on something immovable, so that kind of stuff is a perfect fit for incidentals because you are teaching your body to be strong. You're teaching your nervous system, you're teaching your muscles. For the purpose of hypertrophy, though, you need to give it the time to actually engage in the growth, to actually, make use of the support that you're providing it with, in order to, and in order to adapt, and that means frequency needs to be lower. Okay, so there's the model, there's the lens. I hope that helps to distill things down for you and simplify things. Take this into your own training, see how you apply it. In my case, for example, I'm trying to get a stronger squat and a stronger deadlift right now, and so I do those first. I practice them. I practice with a heavy load, then I practice with a lighter load for multiple sets. And then when I move on to my hypertrophy focused stuff, it tends to be like one set to absolute failure, past failure, really trying to just traumatize, exhaust the muscles, expose them to their own inefficiency. And so I kind of, within one workout, will separate what lens I'm using, what my goal is. Am I teaching strength or am I traumatizing the muscles? Okay, so give it a try. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you everyone who supports the channel. If you want to check out some workout programs that are, I honestly think these are the most efficient workout programs that actually are effective that have ever been created. I'm a bit biased perhaps, but honestly, I've never seen anything that's more efficient and while remaining effective. So please check those out below. They're always on sale on Udemy. Thank you everybody so much, and yeah, just want to remind everybody that excellence is a habit, elite performance is a choice, and it's really just up to you. So go make that choice. Cheers.